Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Well, hey Louise, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very
Am I the only one here? I'm still making a sandwich. I was just going to listen in.
at the moment. Oh, you turn your camera off. You carry on. You carry on. It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you too. I have listened to most of the podcasts that you sent me, and oh boy, I'm going to have to listen to that three different times to
Yeah,
take it all in.
I was listening to it this morning. I listened to a couple this morning, and I was like, oh yes.
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
a
feel
lot there.
like I can say it, but there's something about a medical doctor then also saying the same stuff where I'm like, this validates what I'm saying, but also like let's let the medical doctor be like, and it's like, oh maybe there's something in it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I found that so interesting.
Yeah, fascinating. So it's the first live Q&A. Let me behave
Yes.
myself. Um, I ummed and ahed about whether to start it this month because I've been doing like so much stuff and delivery. It's like, do I do another thing? And I'm like, let's get it started. And we'll see how we get on. So I have a question that I'm going
Okay.
to answer, and people that watch back can watch back and enjoy the question as well. And then obviously if you've got questions or if other people join, then we can answer those too. So my invitation as we start, and invitation for people watching the replay to do the same thing, is just to bring yourself into the call. Like you don't need to stop what you're doing, but just take a moment as you're doing whatever it is that you are doing, just to check in and just notice, how do I feel? How do I feel right now in this moment? And you might give your toes a little wiggle and spend a few moments just focusing on the feet. That often just helps us to drop back into our bodies if we've sort of been elsewhere, living our lives. And so the question that I have been asked, actually, it's a question that has been asked a few times, but I've been asked for it, the purposes of this specifically, is what do you do when you have done lots of therapy, lots of coaching, lots of talking about life situations, so you understand the impact that your childhood had, you understand the patterns that you've picked up, like there's an awful lot of cognitive understanding, and yet there is this deep frustration and annoyance that your experience of the day to day isn't any different, or it's not as different as you want it to be. It's like, is this it? Like, I've done all of this work and still I have to deal with this anger, this grief, this insert whatever, the inability to say no, the feeling like everything needs to be perfect. And so what I want to explore today is what where do you go from here? Like, what's the what next when you've done all the rationalization and the understanding to really get to a place of resolving patterns, right? Because my philosophy, approach, beliefs is that our brains are plastic, like neuroplasticity is a thing. So we have these patterns that we've developed, and we have these patterns that we can unwind, resolve, work through. Okay. And I'm just going to give, I actually spoke to a new client about this yesterday. So I'm going to give the example that I gave him. And you may have heard me give this example before. And I'm okay with that. Like sometimes we need to hear things a few times. But you get a phone call from someone that you are terrified of, or that just stresses you out, or just doesn't make you feel good, right? And you see their number on the phone screen. Okay. You might have done loads of work to understand why you react to this person, why this person makes you feel a certain way, why you're immediate reaction is to feel afraid, angry, anxious, cautious, like whatever it is, okay? But you're still having the reaction, right? And this is where people get frustrated, or people give up, or people think, oh, like therapy didn't work for me, coaching didn't work for me. And where it gets really dangerous is it's because people think that it's because they are the problem. They didn't do it right. They're broken. Somehow they can't fix this challenge. But, and this is my view, and you can take it or leave it, when we have the reaction to the phone, how do we know we're having the reaction to the phone? Right? We know we're having the reaction to the phone because our chest gets tight, our heart rate happens. Maybe all of a sudden we feel hot. Maybe we feel cold. Maybe we feel tense. Everything tenses up, right? All of those things, all of those reactions, all of that experience is happening in our bodies, right? It's a physical reaction. And so you haven't done anything wrong when all of the mental work you've done doesn't solve the problem, because you're trying to solve a physical, I'm going to say problem again, I don't mean it's a bad thing, but you're trying to solve a physical challenge with a mental solution. And we need to solve a physical challenge with a physical solution, right? Because when we experience events in our lives and something stresses us out, our body releases adrenaline, it releases cortisol, it gives us energy to go and deal with the perceived threat, to fight or flee, right? Most of us have heard of fight or flight mode. In our modern world, very often, the thing that's the threat or the perceived threat isn't something that we would fight or run away from. Or if it is, societal constructs means that we don't do that. We don't fight, we don't run. We just stand there and go, oh no, it's fine. It's not a big deal, okay? So all of that energy that got processed for you to run for your life or fight for your life, where does it go? You know, it's been a while since GCSE science for me. So GCSE for the non-UK people is like the exams at 16. But is it one of Newton's laws? Someone's got a law. There's a law of the conservation of energy, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be moved from one form to another. Look at me remembering stuff. I'm at point because I didn't prepare that. And so the energy that gets mobilized, it gets stored in our bodies, right? And so in order to resolve the patterns, or as part of resolving the patterns, we have to get our body to a place where it can release that stuck energy. Now, in my language, I would call that survival energy, right? So we have the stuff mobilized to survive the threat. We don't use it. That survival energy gets stuck in our bodies. What we want to do is get rid of the survival energy, release it, so that then we can access our life force energy, the stuff that makes us, the vibrancy. And that's the bit that is often missing when we're just chatting stuff through. And chatting stuff through is great. It's very helpful. It serves a very useful purpose. But you're never getting to releasing the survival energy in your body, getting to the root of those patterns, because they don't live up here. You're never going to rationalize your way through it. And I just think I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more today, because I think it's so important to understand, so that what we aren't doing is gaslighting ourselves for the patterns that we've got, which are survival patterns. We've developed these patterns because at a point in time, our bodies didn't feel safe enough to run or fight. And we developed coping strategies and mechanisms instead. And that's amazing because it's helped us get to where we are now, right? So we don't want to be beating ourselves up about the patterns. If anything, we want to be grateful for the patterns. And I know that's hard, or sometimes easier said than done. And then we want to look for, how do I create sufficient safety in my body that my body can now complete this cycle? So the stuff that got stuck can now be released. And that really is the next step. Now, it's interesting because if you talk to people who are predominantly trained in somatic experiencing and the body work, so essentially like working with the body and the nervous system, they would say, like, it's so much more efficient to just go to the body. You don't need to talk things through. You don't need mindset work. And I don't actually agree, because I don't think the vast majority of us can go to the body without having done the mindset work first. We need the cognitive understanding. We need the rationalization. We need the ability to, like, at least understand a little bit about our emotions that we're feeling. Like, how do we feel an emotion? How do we process an emotion? If you'd come to me 5 years ago and had been like, what you have is a load of stored trauma and stress patterns in your body, and what we need to do is release those, you wouldn't have got a lot from me. I'll be honest. Right? I had to understand first, oh, I have some patterns of behavior here that aren't that helpful. And that, to be honest, was quite a big jump for me, because I was very good at blaming everybody else and everything around me. It's like, oh, I've got some stuff I need to deal with. Okay, right. Then I needed to look at, okay, well, why do I have this stuff that I need to deal with? What are the things that have happened to me? What are the experiences that I've had? Oh, next great big bombshell. I didn't have the most healthy, normal, desirable, gold-plated childhood in the world that I maybe thought I had. There was some stuff there that's a little bit dysfunctional. So now I need to spend some time looking at and understanding that and stepping out of the denial, challenging, right? And so we have to go through all of these different phases before we're finally at this point of, back to the question, I've done the therapy, I've done the coaching, I understand it all now, I've made some good progress, but there's still something left. And I think for the majority of people, that's the process we need to go through. Because when we experience these things that are challenging for us in our lives, we have to disconnect from ourselves. It's a survival pattern, right? So most of us have got no idea what's going on from the neck down. We might think we have, but we haven't really. We're not connected to ourselves. We're not connected to our intuition. We don't have all of that going on. And so to try and go from that to, where do you feel it in your body, let's complete this pattern, is just way too much. And so again, I just want to bring this in. If you are someone who is trying to do the body work and are finding it really challenging, right? That's okay too. We're all in a process and we're all at the perfect place for where we need to be. And the job is, can you give yourself a little bit of grace and compassion to just be where you are? Can you find someone to help you go wherever you want to go next? And honestly, the most important part of that is just finding someone you can feel safe with. The guy I spoke to yesterday said, he was like, but I've done some of this like work where you go into your body. I'm like, yeah, but there is a world of difference between, where can you feel that in your body? Oh, I feel it in my chest. Okay, great. Can you stay with that? And then taking that all the way through to, and then what happens and what opens up and what's the visual that comes in and what's the sound that you notice and what's the memory that pops up and what happens if you stay with that and what's the impulse, and then what do you want to do and who do you need to push away and what do you need to say. And to stay with someone to be able to do all of that requires a level of trust and safety as well. All right, so they're just some things to think about. So I know that's quite a long answer to the question, but it's important. We need to stop being mean to ourselves that we aren't getting the results that we think we should have, because it's just a process, and we're all in a process, and the process takes as long as the process takes, and the process has got more layers to it than most of us realize when we start the process. Right? And it all just is what it is. That is that. Do you have any questions that you want to ask, or are you here to kind of listen in on your lunch break?
I was here to listen in on lunch, but no, I'm good. I was thinking back about what you were talking about. I listened recently to the podcast with is it Ackerman, Amy Ackerman?
Amy Acker, yes.
Acker, yeah. And so I'm thinking about this in light of having listened to that over, I think maybe yesterday. Yeah. And I think about the spiral staircase, right? And sort of hitting the same points, as you go around in the circle, but from a different angle. And certainly that has been my experience. I would not have been at all open to the body work, to this work, without having done the mindset work. First, it was a necessary entry point, and it's something that I observe in the coaching world online, is there's a lot of and I think probably what you were talking about with some of the practitioners out there, you just need to go straight here, you need to go straight to these other modalities, but it doesn't take into account that might not be where people are. They may need another doorway in to then figure out what it is they need.
Yeah, which Amy on that podcast makes the point very well towards the end, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's like, well, actually, sometimes people just can't go there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a lot of us who need another doorway in.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting what you say. So when you reference her podcast, Good Girl Syndrome, right? Good Girl,
right.
the nervous system state is the name of that podcast. And I have just started working. So I've done lots of business masterminds. I've never worked with a one-to-one business coach before. And I finally found one that I feel like I can get on board with. I'm very, 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 very skeptical of business coaching. I can't begin to tell you, right?
Yeah.
And we had our first one-to-one session this morning. And she said to me, reflected back to me, we were talking about various bits, and she reflected back to me, she went, you do know that your persona is the good girl. She went, you do know that. She said, that's how you come across, as the good girl.
Yeah.
And I thought, do you know what? It's so interesting. It's so interesting how like that stuff is still there. And there's the next situation, there's the next situation, the next situation. And it's like, and where do we keep holding ourselves back? What's the next layer of the spiral that needs to come through? What's the stuff that I don't say on social media that I might say in a space, and it's just so interesting for us just to start to notice, okay, so it's the next pattern of that spiral. She was like, you're the good girl. She was like, but in there deep down there's an absolute badass. And I'm like, well. But then my challenge is, I think the badass came out almost too much in corporate. And so then it's almost trying to come back. This is turned into a podcast interview.
Yeah.
But then it's like you come back almost too much away from well, that was bad.
Yeah.
So now let me be like this kind of thing. But it's just very interesting to watch and notice for all of us.
Yeah. No, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do think there's a pendulum, kind of when we swing from one extreme to another. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm about to become the highly sexualized coach with the boob.
Right.
I was a bit. I mean, never say never. I'll be here in a year's time. I don't know.
Yeah, there we go. There'll be a whole new Louise.
Louise version 87 point whatever. But
yeah.
But it is just interesting to notice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you I don't need to drag this out for half an hour. If you have another question or there's anything else that you'd like to talk about, we can use the time, and otherwise we can call this.
Yeah. So the only other question, something that I would ask. So I have noticed, trying to be more intentional about checking in with my body. What am I feeling? It's like never good. I mean, and obviously I know that there's good stuff there. But anytime that I remember to check in, it's never because wow, I'm feeling great, I guess. But just sort of any thoughts you might have on that.
I have some thoughts on that. And so
Hmm.
what you said then is, so you notice you check in and it's never great. And then you sort of
Hmm.
it was like a little throwaway comment that was like, well, like sometimes there's some okay stuff, but like generally when I check in, it's negative. So
Hmm.
what I would encourage you to do is to just get clear on the default state.
Mm. Hmm.
So you might notice, okay, well, do you know what? Right now I'm feeling a little bit sick.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Like my stomach feels, or I feel a little bit sick, right? And so
Hmm.
you might spend 5 seconds. Okay, well, what just happened if I bring my attention to my stomach for a few seconds?
Hmm.
And you might be like, it's too intense, it's too uncomfortable. I need to save this for coaching session. And then that's it. That's the end of that's it.
Hmm.
But you
Hmm.
can just notice, like, what happens if I just spend a few moments with my hand on my stomach? Okay, well, actually, the thickness goes away a little bit, or like whatever. Okay. And then I want you to add in, okay, and now where in my body feels the most pleasant,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
And if it's nowhere, you can use your LCS tools to find the neutral place,
Hmm.
right? So where feels neutral. And neutral places will often be like an ear, the tip of the nose, an elbow, a thumb. Like our
Yeah.
noses don't normally feel like tense and anxious, right?
Right. Right.
Okay, so what happens then if I bring my attention to that part of me that feels pleasant or neutral? And maybe you put a
Hmm.
hand there, right? And you do that for a few seconds. And then you just check in again. Okay, well, now how do I feel? What do I notice? Okay, well, actually, the intensity in my stomach's gone from a 7 to a 6 to a 5. Okay.
Mm.
Now, there is a tool called pendulation.
Mm.
Think of the pendulum. We just swing from one to the other. It's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
pendulum. So you would move in and out of that for a little bit. And this is just how we get the body used, how we get used to being in the body and get used to being with those more uncomfortable sensations. So it's like, okay, so back to my stomach, a few seconds on my stomach.
Hmm.
What happens there? Okay, well, now where feels the most pleasant, where feels the most neutral. Okay, well, maybe it's my right shoulder. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
my right shoulder. Okay, well, what happens if I put a hand there? Because what you are teaching your body and yourself is that
Hmm.
even when you feel really yuck, there are parts of you that can feel okay or at least
Mm.
neutral. Because there's always going to
Hmm.
be somewhere that feels neutral, right? I mean, let's hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
So over time, what we learn to do is create a felt sense of safety and goodness in the body,
Mm.
which if we were to go through the whole process of how do we renegotiate these patterns in our system, the first layer of that renegotiation is resources,
Hmm.
which you know about already. How do we resource ourselves so we have the energy available to do this work, live our work, like and thrive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stage in that process is a felt sense of safety and goodness in the body. And we create the felt sense of safety and goodness in the body with stuff like the orienting to pleasure, because we
Hmm.
teach our body that it doesn't have to be looking for threat all the time. It can be looking for something more,
Mm.
right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And we use that pendulation, we use that tool to teach us that even when things feel hard, we can still find somewhere in our bodies that feel good.
That feels safe.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
if you were going to go in and out and in and out, you wouldn't do it more than 2 or 3 times, but you would always
Hmm.
finish on the part of you that feels the most pleasant or neutral.
Mm.
So you're finishing in a positive way. The other thing that you might do is intentionally checking with your body from a place of goodness. So
Mm.
rather than just asking the question, how do I feel? What do I notice?
Hmm.
you might just once or twice a day ask the question of like, where feels good right now?
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where feels good in my body right now? What feels nice in this room right now? What would feel really yummy right now?
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. Yeah.
You know, it might be, mine's over there now, but a heat pack on the stomach.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can just start to just not in a toxic positivity, let's ignore our hard feelings thing, but just in a
Right.
redressing the balance piece. I think that might be a really useful one for you. Like, where feels good right now?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that resonates a lot because it's almost as if asking the question pulls up something negative.
Mm. Yeah.
And I don't know if it does,
Yeah.
but that's sort of what the feeling is. It's like if I check in, it's just not going to be, it's going to be kind of a down or a sad or something else.
Yeah. So there's almost like a dread behind the checking in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's how do we make the checking in process
Yeah.
neutral?
Yeah. 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 No, that sounds good. I like that a lot. That's helpful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And also,
Mm-hmm.
just to be realistic, there's also times that we want to stay with the dread,
Mm-hmm.
but probably not right now when you're just checking in on your own. That's probably
Yeah.
not when.
That's not when to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, because we want the, you know, thinking about the nervous system and soothing the nervous system and regulating the nervous system. We want to spend a decent chunk of time helping the nervous system to feel safe,
Yeah.
to not react to things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that.
So if you do it now, where
Yeah.
in your body right now feels pleasant or neutral?
I guess I default to my feet.
Yeah.
That seems to be so
Yeah.
so easy and innocuous. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't worry. Feet is 99% of the response that I would get in this situation.
Oh, okay.
If you bring your attention to your feet and
Mm-hmm.
wiggle your toes,
Mm-hmm.
maybe push your feet into the floor a little bit, what do you notice?
I think generally they feel healthy and alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what do you notice in the rest of your body when you focus on your feet?
Um, some of the other sensations just sort of abate, kind of go into the background.
So that
Yeah.
might just be something that you spend a little bit of time with, just spending time focusing on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And let it be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Let it be enough. That's a tall order, but yes, let it be enough.
You know.
Yeah.
All right, my love. It's been lovely
All
to have
right.
you
Thank you
here.
so much, Louise. I
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Hello to everybody on the replay. And yeah, so these are going to be the last Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m. UK time. You can send me questions in advance. You can come and ask questions live. And it's just really a way for me to get to know my email community a little bit more and for my email community to be able to get their individual questions answered. So I will see you next time.
All right. Thank you.